all of this energy has been stuck and looping and looping and looping. And all of a sudden, it's starting to flow again.
This is The Deep Dive with Adam Roa.
Oh, what's up, deep divers? Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Deep Dive podcast. Today, it's just me and you. It is a musing, as I like to call it, as we dive into my mind a little bit. And before I get started on that, I just want to remind you about the Create Community, thecreatecommunity.com. It is completely free. We do live streamed online events every single day. Things from yoga to cooking class to singing lessons to open mic nights and acoustic concerts, virtual house parties, really unique, epic facilitators. The best that I know, basically, is what I do. Is I bring in. I'm really lucky and blessed to have surrounded myself with some of the most epic humans on the planet. They facilitate workshops all around the world. Our yoga instructors lead yoga retreats all over the world, and our singing class teacher has been featured on The Voice. Like they're so high level, and so it's completely free. So if you want to join and take part in the events, I highly encourage you to do so. And that's really exciting to me. So today's topic is about becoming a match to your vision, becoming a match to what it is that you're actually calling into your life. And this has stemmed from quite the stir that I caused by revealing some of the behind the scenes of my recent journey, my recent ceremonies to do exactly that, to become a match. And before I go into that, I just want to set the context, which is that I truly believe that we are like radio transmitters. We are transmitting a frequency out from us, and we are receiving a frequency, right? And for simplicity's sake, it's the same one, right? If you're at 100.5, you are receiving it at 100.5 and you're spitting it out at 100.5. It's more complex than that, but just for simplicity's sake. And and I know you're listening to this because you're deep divers. So part of the complexity is that you might receive it at a certain frequency, but then it's actually alchemizing in your system and coming out potentially at a different frequency. What we want to do is become clear vessels as much as possible for it to be received at a high frequency, like 100.5, and then come out as close to that as possible without all of the fears and doubts and insecurities and all of that stuff getting attached to it, and greed and whatnot. So that's where it goes a little deeper for you deep divers. And for this conversation, let's say you're receiving at 100.5, it's coming out at 100.5, right? So you have this vision, you have this idea, you have this business that you want to start, you have this art piece that you want to start, whatever it is. And you are going, yeah, but there's something I can't figure out. For me, I'm currently in the launch of my nonprofit, Surrendered Artist. I am in discussions about purchasing majority stake ownership of a business and starting that new business as an agency, essentially, an artist acceleration agency. And then I've launched the Create Community. And then I have all my other stuff, right? Like the podcast and these various things. And so as I'm launching these things, I've been feeling like I have hit my capacity to hold. And this is where I can't really explain what that feels like. It's something that I've learned over the years. It's something that I've refined over the years of experience with this. And in that experience, I feel like I'm hitting a wall. The analogy I've used before is like when you watch one of those vacuum cleaners that automated like robot vacuum cleaners that are hitting the wall over and over and over, and it keeps like spinning a little bit, and eventually it breaks loose. These little like micro pivots, right? And that's what it feels like in my system at this stage. And when that happens, I know that I get to make micro pivots, like little micro pivots, similar to that vacuum cleaner robot. But sometimes I can't see how to pivot. I can't see where to pivot. It's not clear. It's not obvious. I feel stuck in a loop. Like I know that there's something different here. There's got to be, because I believe in infinite possibilities, and I believe that if I'm so clear in my intuition, like this is something that gets to be created. If I'm working on a poem, for example, and I'm like, this poem is awesome, but I don't know where it goes next. I look at that as if I'm not currently the match to receive the ending to that poem. In business, I look at those pivots as, okay, I'm not currently the match to be able to see the patterns of how to shift this. And I believe that there is an ending to that poem. I believe that there are pivots I can make in the business. And so my job is saying, okay, I've been receiving at 100.5 and I've been creating at 100.5 as a radio transmitter. And now I get to go to 101.5. Okay? Because that's where the answer is. That's where the patterns get put together. Great. Amazing. How do I do that? And I love to give you the science, a logical explanation for what I'm talking, because so far what I've been explaining is very much in the realms of energetics, frequency, esoterics, and on a practical level. What does that mean? That means that at 100.5, there are set parameters at which my current brain is working to put patterns together. And when it gets looped in on itself, it's important to shift the neurology so that I have the ability to put together different patterns, so that my brain can look at the puzzle and go, oh, got it. It's like you're told to build a spaceship with Legos, and you're working on it, and you get to a point and you're like, I don't even know where to go from here. And someone comes and gives you additional pieces. That's like the logical equivalent to what I'm talking about. And so what I did this past week was Kambo. And Kambo is a secretion from a frog, the giant tree frog, down in South America. And in a stress response, the frog secretes this poison, essentially, so that things won't eat it. And what in indigenous cultures for I don't even know how long, they'll scrape this off the frog. It doesn't hurt the frog. It does stress the frog. That's why it's being released, just so everyone knows. And they gather this, and then what happens, and for those of you watching on YouTube, I'll show you the kind of scars on my arm while I'm describing this, because I have them both sides and I have them on the back of my neck. They take a stick, they light it on fire, and they put it out on your skin. And you can see on my arm, you have 8 of these. And so they're burn marks. And then on the burns, they place a dot, they call a dot of this secretion, this poison. And what happens is your system basically goes, oh, hell no. And all these peptides are released and all these things, and your system goes no, and it pushes kidneys, liver, all of this stuff. It pushes out into the stomach. At which point you start to purge. You start to throw up, and you while they are doing the whole thing where you're getting burned and the medicine's being applied, you're chugging water. So for me, I was chugging about 1.5 liters to 2 liters of water in a 15-minute window, so that the water becomes the carrier for the toxins to leave your body when you throw up. Makes it much easier instead of dry throw up, just a bunch of bile and toxins. Now, generally, so I've done this. These were probably my 10, 11, 12 type ceremonies with this particular medicine. It's one of my least favorite experiences on the planet. I don't particularly enjoy it. So it's not like I use it all the time. It's been 1.5 years since the last time I did it. The last time I did it was actually in Thailand, and we recorded it on film, and it became a part of The Art of Choosing Love, I think it's episode 17. It's the season finale of season 1. So anyone who wants to actually see me do this process, you can go to YouTube and look up The Art of Choosing Love, episode 17. And so with that said, it's you throw up so much and you haven't eaten for at least 12 hours prior to that. And then you generally rest, eat, regain your strength. And the goal is to do it 3 times in a moon cycle, right? So you could do it once a week or whatever. I did it 3 days in a row. And the thing is that part of this was me feeling a very clear guidance that I needed to be doing a water fast as well. And water fasting means I'm drinking water, but not eating food. I did this in a safe way, by the way. I made sure to have some electrolytes in the water. I was in communication with my Kambo facilitator the whole time. We were talking about it because there are definitely risks to something like Kambo on its own. And it's not necessarily advised to be water fasting for like this whole period of time because you're not regaining your strength. And so there are risks. So make sure you look into it. But I did it as safely as I possibly could. And it felt like instructions. It felt like, do this. And if you've been following me for a while, you know I just kind of listened to this guidance. And so I ended up water fasting for a total of 88 hours. So a little more than 3.5 days with no food. And during that time, 3 straight mornings of waking up and doing these intense Kambo ceremonies. I did this because it was what my intuition was guiding me to. What became clear was the reason it was being asked of me to do it this way is because there was an old energetic that was running under the surface that was keeping me in a loop of being unable to break out of that loop. It was this old program, and it was tied to the like an energetic, which is always tied to something physical, which may have been exactly what needed to be thrown up. But it was so old and so deep that I needed to be empty to get to it. It was like under so many layers that it's like it needed to be empty to get to it. And so it was the longest water fast I've ever done. It was only the second time I've ever done 3 Kambo ceremonies in a row. It's the first time I've ever done them together. And here's the thing. When we shift our reality, like inner reality, when we shift our inner reality, our external reality has to adjust. If you're going back to this radio analogy, if you're at 100.5 and you go to 101.5, the external world outside of you will begin to move itself into 101.5. Okay. The larger your internal shift, if you go from 100.5 to 110.5, that shift internally is so massive that your external world has to shift has to begin to shift to match 110.5. And what you're going to see is going to be incredibly obvious. It's going to happen incredibly quickly and often dramatically. Because let's say that it was going to take you 10 days to go from 100 to get to your new frequency, let's say, just as these are all rhetorical, hypothetical stuff. But if it's going to take you 10 days, the difference between 100.5 and 101.5 over 10 days is 0.1 a day. But the difference between 100.5 and 110.5 is a full 1 per day. And so it's going to be just like, whoa. And so what happens is the next morning I wake up, the first morning where I've woken up out of ceremony, let's say I've closed it, and I step out of bed, and you may have seen this on my Instagram, but I step out of bed and into water. Through the night, it had stormed so bad that it had flooded the entire lower level where I was sleeping and where I was staying. And I'm in ankle deep water stepping out of bed in the morning. And the first thing I feel is such gratitude, because literally there's so many electronics down there that like surge protectors and power surges and outlets and all these different music pedals for things that are electronic, like all in the water. And I thought of how easily I could have just been electrocuted and completely died. Like that would have been the end of Adam Roa right there. And so incredibly grateful. And that meant that it was the end of where I was staying. I changed rooms. The very next day, my ex came and picked up Serendipity, my dog, who I've had for 6 weeks, the entire quarantine time, basically, that I've been here. And so I saw in 2 days my entire external reality that I'd been living in shift. No more dog, completely different room, needing to stay in a completely different room. The plan of like a recording studio, which was downstairs and where I was like working on music and stuff, completely gone. I have to tear up the boards and everything. So just completely gone. My reality shifted dramatically in the 36 hours after the end of that ceremony. And of course, I'm used to that by now. That to me was just a reflection of how much of a shift happened internally, where the universe said, yo, things have to change right now. Next morning, have to change. And the great thing is that literally 2 days later, I had a piece of like the puzzle drop in that was so exciting and freed up my bandwidth so much that I have a renewed sense of excitement. I have a renewed sense of freedom. I have a new sense of flow. The best way I've described this to people is it's like when your leg's asleep and you realize it's asleep and you stretch it out and all of a sudden it tingles and it starts to, blood starts to flow back to it. It feels like that just on my like whole energy body. It's like all of this energy has been stuck and looping and looping and looping. And all of a sudden it's starting to flow again. And what that feels like is so good. And so I know that piece of information existed at some frequency level, some radio frequency level that I wasn't a match to. I wasn't able to see it. I wasn't able to figure it out. And where so many people struggle is that they'll just sit and try and like mentally figure it out, right? Like they're just like mentally like, like if I do this, I do this. And I'm one of those people. I can do that a lot, to the point where even when I know I'm like, yeah, I feel like I don't know the end of this poem. I feel like the blah, blah, blah. I can just sit there and like, think that I'm going to force my way mentally into it because I have such a strong mental capacity, because I have relied on my intellect so much in my life. That is a big part of this, why I want to go into that route. But over the years, more and more, I'm learning that this is tried and true. It's proven to me time and again that if I can't figure it out, and I've done everything I can to do it, and I know that I'm looping, the solution for me is to alter my state internally. Alter my state of consciousness. It's an internal frequency. And yes, I do use plant medicines as a way of doing that. If you look at studies of people on like LSD in a CAT scan machine or MRI machine, fMRI machine, you're seeing that their brain lights up in an entirely different way when they're looking at the same photo. So they go into the machine, they're shown a photo, they see how their brain reacts, and then they are given the medicines, and they go back into the MRI machine, and the same photo elicits an entirely different reaction in the brain. New places in the brain light up. New patterns are able to be put together. And you don't have to use plant medicines, but there are so many ways to alter consciousness. Meditation, breath work, yoga, a long run, a hard exercise alters your brain chemistry, alters your state of consciousness. You don't know, you can't figure it out, go on a really long run. Why do you think we have so many stories of people like Isaac Newton discovered gravity like because an apple drops on his head, or people in the shower having that eureka moment? The reason for that, that we have those stories is because it's not about us like forcing our intellect to the problem. It's about doing everything we can to create the space and then saying, okay, now I got to let it go and become a match to receive the answer. And this is how I choose to live my life. This is the actual foundational belief that I operate by, and what causes me to do things like go into Kambo ceremonies and water fasting and all these things, because I've seen it work. I've seen poems be ended and completed in ways that exceed anything I could have thought of before. I see business ideas drop in that click things together and free up my energy. I see so much shift in my life as a result of operating with this ethos, and I wanted to share it with you. Because a lot of people, when they saw the photos of on my social media, on Facebook and on Instagram, of my face all swollen and looking so bad as a result of a reaction to the Kambo, they judged me. And there's a lot of people saying, "What the hell are you doing? That doesn't look healthy. Like, you shouldn't do that," et cetera, et cetera. This is why I do it. Not because it's necessarily fun, not because it's comfortable, but because it works. And not just plant medicines. I'm talking about altering your inner world, altering your inner frequency, adjusting your inner state to become a match to receive the ideas, to become a match to receive those little pieces that are necessary for your next step. Because your next step is an evolution. And that is key. You are evolving, you are expanding. So what are you doing day in and day out? What are you doing when you hit that wall like that vacuum cleaner robot over and over and over? How are you choosing to pivot? Start today. Start thinking about that. Start pivoting. Start adjusting your inner world. You got this. If this has been helpful to you, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, subscribe on iTunes and Spotify, share this out with the world, leave a review, just anything to help me spread this podcast far and wide, because the more people who create from this space, the more we collectively expand and grow. And that is truly a rising tide lifts all ships. We're in it together. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved.